Welcome. This is John Hyman from Commercial Real Estate Online. Welcome to the program. Welcome to the video. This is another in the Industrial Property Checklist series. This is a series of topics relating to industrial property. It's especially relevant if you get involved in sales or leasing of industrial property in your location. Now, the website features the article from which this matrix is taken. The article is "The Industrial Property Knowledge is the Key in Listing." And I have taken a lot of detail from this particular article. There is a book here about that, and you can download that book as a PDF. The topic is also explained there on that website page there for you. So, industrial property knowledge is the key in listing. If you are indeed an industrial agent or would like to be, then you probably should print this article and or get the particular ebook, which is a simple download as a PDF. It is free. So let's go further and let's have a look at the matrix. I have covered some of the other topics here in earlier videos. Today I want to go into item number 5. So this is the industrial property checklist, and today I'm going to cover off on item number 5. So let's move into that topic, and it is all about prices and best methods of sale that apply to an industrial property today. So where do you start with this? How do you handle this when you're working with industrial property? Well, within this topic, I think you need to look at the 3 things: comparable properties, evidence from the area in a particular way, and also methods of sale that should apply to your listing. Now, of course, you have the potential of listing this in industrial property for your brokerage services and, of course, taking that property to the market. So you need to think about what you're going to do, how you are going to approach things. So let's go first into comparable properties. Let's say you have an industrial property to take to the market. So you should go out there and look at the comparable properties in the region. And within that, there are these particular topics, which are improvements, occupancy, precinct, rents, and vacancy factors. So let's go through them firstly this way. Firstly, improvements. When you're looking at an industrial property, you should look at these particular aspects to understand them. Now, I'm referring, of course, to comparable properties. That's how I'm coming at this topic. Comparable properties, the improvements in those comparable properties. What are the improvements? Well, you need to look at the hard stand, that is the storage on site, the hard stand area outside the property within the perimeter boundaries. You should also look at the office area, how it works within those comparable properties, if indeed the office area is too small, too large, whether it's practical, modern, etc. Then, of course, you should consider the services. Now, this is quite important because within the topic, services in an industrial location are quite specific and important. These are the many topics here to think about: communications, drainage, electricity, gas, sewer, stormwater, transport, and water. And if you look at these individually, for example, communications, what do you need in an industrial property? Well, you need to communicate to the world, and that will involve data, internet, and telephone. How practical is the property, the comparable property, when it comes to communications in that specific area? So communications are part of the services matrix, and you should be analysing services for each comparable property that you are looking at when it comes to the other listing that you may take to the market. So services are part of improvements. Let's go further and back here. So we're back at the improvements level. I took you into the services aspect of the comparable properties. Then, of course, you can look at the showroom in your listing to understand if there is a showroom there, how it works. I did say earlier that you should look at the office property as well, hard stand, etc. So all parts of your listing should be reviewed. And the showroom is something that's quite important to some industrial businesses. And then, of course, there is the warehouse as to its design, its functionality, its modern nature, how the storage will work within your particular property and how you can compare that to other properties. So the improvements in all comparable properties should be assessed on this basis: warehouse, showroom, hard stand, office, and services. Those improvements will be perhaps comparable to your listing, perhaps not. The reason you look into this quite deeply is simply to understand how comparable another property may be to your listing. That's the way you look at it. So let's go back to the main topic here in the comparable properties topic, the improvements I just went into. Now let's look at occupancy. When you're looking deeply into occupancy, you should look at things like this in the comparable properties. The length of the lease, that is the tenant in occupancy. How good is the lease? How long is it? The precinct, is the precinct a good industrial precinct? How does it work? Then of course you should look at the type of occupant business in that property and the zoning, whether it's suitable for good industrial applications over time. So that is occupancy, that is in a comparable property. Taking it a bit further, let's look at precinct. So you're looking at all comparable properties to your listing. The precincts have to be assessed. You have to look at other businesses in the location, the future supply and demand within the area for other industrial applications and properties, and you should look at the zoning of properties within the precincts, the comparable precincts for the comparable properties. Now, when you look at each property, you need to dig down into the rent structure for the property, and the rents are many different things. So don't just look at your comparable properties, understand the rents that apply. They will be the effective rent, that is the rent without any impact of incentives. The face rent, that will be the rent that could be impacted by incentives. The gross rent, taking into account the overall rent paid, including the outgoings for the asset. You should understand how the rents were struck in that comparable property, whether the rents were struck under true market conditions or whether they were a product of some fixed escalation, such as a percentage review. And you will need to know about incentives, the incentives that apply in those comparable properties. The incentives could be rent-free, discounted rent over time, perhaps some fit-out money, perhaps some cash, perhaps some fit-out. Of course, there is a net rent that you need to think about, how that net rent may work within the asset and whether it's appropriate for the market conditions, the precinct, the properties that you are comparing. The reason you dig down in rents is to fully understand what you're looking at and to get to know if the rents are truly comparable to the property that you are taking to the market. And of course, in the comparable properties, you should be looking at the quality of improvements. Are they modern or are they redundant, perhaps old? Look at the quality of the improvements in the asset. And in each comparable property, assess the types of leases, whether it's a good quality lease. Now, some of these things you may not be able to get to the bottom of. I understand that because some of this information is hard to get to, hard to get at. But you should raise the question. You should try and form an opinion. Perhaps you can talk to the property owner or the investor in each case to understand some of this information. The idea of assessing comparable properties is that you can get to the bottom of the real rents, the effective face gross rents were struck in a particular way, incentives, net rent, quality improvements and types of leases. As I said, some of these things you can't get to, but you should question them if you can. So let's go back out into another topic here. I did cover rents then, and I just want to raise the other topic here, which is vacancy factors within the precincts for the comparable properties. Now, vacancy factors will be, just how popular a particular area is, how much other new property is coming into the precinct, and that could, of course, have an impact on future supply and demand. So understand these things relative to your comparable properties that you are comparing to your particular property listing that you're taking to the market. So comparable properties, these are the things you need to understand when you're comparing things. And that is within the topic of best methods of sale and the prices. You can go into other things, of course, further, which will be the evidence of sales in the area. And the evidence of sales will be the prices that have been struck and are asked, the rents that are currently out there in the comparable properties, future supply and demand, and also the yields that relate to the listings that are out there, the yields that are achieved. Perhaps they are strong yields from an investor's perspective, which might be a high yield number, which might be 7% or thereabouts. However, if it's a very popular location and you'll find that some investors want to purchase that property, the yield will be driven down because the price will go up. So it could go below 7%, perhaps down to 6%. And of course, yields are relative to your town or city, your location, your country to a degree. Yields are always relative to your location. Understand what they are for the industrial property. Let's go back in here and look at methods of sale. And methods of sale can be a number of different things. I put them all here. I'll mention a few comments on each of them. Now, auction is something that's useful if there's a good degree of interest regards the industrial property. Auction will be, of course, taking the property to auction at a particular date, usually a 5 to 6 week campaign. Exchange is not very common, but it does happen. Exchange is where a property owner is willing to exchange his property or her property for another property that someone else may own. Exchange situations do occur. They are quite special, and valuations need to be done relative to each asset before the exchange is put through. And indeed, the differences may need to be supported by some monetary difference, monetary payment. Expressions of interest are reasonably common in industrial property. Expressions of interest relate to the property being put to the market over a 4 to 6 week period, inviting expressions of interest from buyers. So there'll be terms and conditions to that expression of interest. Also, you need to consider the marketing campaign that could apply to the methods of sale. The marketing campaigns could be of 3 different types. You'll have choices that will be gold, silver or bronze. And in the marketing campaign, you'll need to think about direct marketing, offline marketing and online marketing. Let's go back to methods of sale. A sale at a price is one particular method that you need to think about. A sale at a price would be advertising the property at a particular price that you know is reasonable for the property in its location, driven by comparable evidence, which I mentioned earlier. Also, you should be determining the target market that applies to the asset so that you target the advertising correctly. Now, tender is a special method of selling industrial property. It's a bit similar to expressions of interest, but tender, on the other hand, is more formal and it has contract documents attached to it. So the people who wish to participate in the tender will need to complete the tender documents and the contract of sale as part of submitting their tender together with deposit monies. So tender is very formal. Tender is very good if you're trying to tie a potential purchaser to the purchase of an industrial asset. Now, within the methods of sale, the other thing to think about here is the timing of sale. So, what will that be? Perhaps it's a time of year. Perhaps it relates to the business community in the area. Understand the variables. Make sure that you've got them all covered. So, they are the topics within prices and best methods of sale that apply to industrial property today, the industrial property checklist. There are many other topics in this particular video series. I've covered number 5, and in the subsequent videos I'll be covering off on all of the others. It's all about industrial property, this particular series, so tune into the YouTube video series and or check out the website. And of course you can get the article for this particular topic, which is here. Industrial property knowledge is the key in listing. I wrote this article back in 2012, but I update it regularly and consistently, so you can download the PDF book there as well to help you stay on top of the things that I'm mentioning here. So, my name is John Hyman. Thank you for listening to the program. I'll catch you again very soon online with another video for the Industrial Property Checklist. This is John Hyman signing off for now. I'll catch you very soon again. Thank you.